Welcome back to Unlapped. We've made it here at COTA, Circuit of the Americas, Austin, Texas, alongside Nate Saunders, Laurence Edmondson. I'm Dalen Cuff. Katie, George, thank you for not being here. Gentlemen, great to be here with you. If you're watching on YouTube, review, subscribe for more F1 content, get involved. This is the epicenter of sport in our country for sure, and you could make an argument for the world anytime the F1 circus rolls into town. But Saturday night you have the Georgia-Texas game, #1 versus #5. College Game Day's here. Our ESPN set is here. We've got all types of things. Sting and Eminem are going to be performing in here. Nate, as you just think about what this weekend's going to be like what jumps out to you?
Yeah, it's mad. I mean, we're calling it the Texas Takeover here at ESPN, aren't we? And it does feel like that. And the great thing with this event, even if you take the college out of it, this is always a really just great weekend. It takes kind of that groovy vibe of Austin. They've been really good here at leading into those events. You add the college vibe into it. I mean, I think Saturday night here is going to be pretty wild. Yeah. I don't know if it's going to be easy to find a spot to eat or anything. But yeah, this I think is a dream for COTA because they've always kind of wanted to try and lead into that college aspect. So many fans come here now year to year. And yeah, I think it's going to be amazing. And the great thing is for this race, it's in a strange position really because you've got Miami has come in. They've got they're quite popular now. Vegas has come in and been a success. Austin is always trying to redefine itself. What better way to stamp your mark as a Texas race than having a Texas college game? And, like you said, massive show, great race, title fight potentially. So I think it's a really good moment for them to kind of just restamp that mark on the race.
Because we've been waiting for a long time actually for a Texas college
game. It's been a while, hasn't
to match up with a US Grand Prix.
Texas the people want them to be good again. It took till last year for them to be good again. But here they are.
I'm going to say very suspicious. Now they're #1. It's like, hey, it's on.
It's all coming together.
Well, I'm on a learning curve this weekend because I know very little about college football, but it is fascinating. But we've been waiting for a long time for that to match up. And I think this city as well, the way it kind of just gives itself over to Formula One when Formula One turns up in town is fantastic. The bars are great, the live music's great. So to have all of that together is really great. And as you say, with Vegas, just a few races away and everything that has gone on around that race and the hype and all of that kind of stuff, I still think you come here and it's special. And it's special because I've always said it feels like the fans race.
It does.
Vegas and Miami, it's for the VIPs. You come here, it's for the fans. Right where we're stood here on this hill will be packed full of fans.
And what a view, by the way, as well, of this start. To start here is incredible.
One of the best views in motorsport, I would say. I mean, we're lucky because we get to go trackside all around the world. We get to go to the Suzuka S's. We get to go to Eau Rouge at Spa-Francorchamps. Here is very, very cool, watching 20 F1 cars come up that hill and trying to fight into turn 1. So, yeah, very excited to be here.
And I always remember 2021 here, especially the first year back after the pandemic, when that Netflix boom was like well and truly on. This race, I remember the noise beforehand was incredible, and that has just kind of grown every single year. So I agree with Laurence. And I like that this has kept the US Grand Prix name. Obviously, you've got Miami and Vegas. I think this race is glad that they've got that as their name for it. It's like those two can do their own thing. We're still like, this is the America race. Yeah. Like this is we're going to do everything bombastically American. I think it's great. So
well, that's Texas. Here
yeah, exactly. Everything's bigger in Texas.
This is only my second race. I was in Vegas, my first race in person, so I'm geeked up to be here. But to your point, shout out to the Spatola family. Chris Spatola works for ESPN as well. But I was at their house a couple weeks ago, and they're obsessed with F1. They wake up in the mornings, they have breakfast Sunday before the races, and they were saying we want to go to a race. Priced out of Miami, priced out of Vegas. I'm like, you got to come to COTA. It ain't cheap, but it seems like the people's race more than anything else in our country.
And also, this is a proper racetrack. We were just talking about this. Built in 2012. That was when. So 2012. That was the first race here. But to have a permanent circuit where you can overtake, where you have the undulation that you have here, where you have the high-speed corners that you have here. You don't get that on a street circuit. You get lots of other stuff. You get a lot of drama. Vegas looks great under the lights. Miami's got its kind of own quirks, but it's not a brilliant racetrack. This place really is, and I think that's something that this circuit, the people that run it, can really hold on to and promote because it would be a worse calendar without this race on it.
All right, let's get into the race a little bit too, because as you mentioned, the undulation is no joke. Those watching on YouTube, we are like it's like 300. You're up high, like that walk.
Yeah, the walk up here was pretty tough.
And Laurence is he's gonna do the jog in a couple of days of the whole track. He's not looking forward to turn 1. But you got that. There's a resurfacing on the track. We've got the ability to overtake, but you also this race is massive for the championship, for the drivers' championship. And the constructors, maybe less so, but when you look at this in terms of Max and Lando specifically, and all these upgrades coming from all these different teams after 4 weeks off. Are you going to expect McLaren to still win this thing at the end?
I think this is a tone-setting race for the rest of the season because we have that sprint, we have the updates you mentioned. This is, if McLaren can come here and just maximize those points, Red Bull are already under pressure. They leave here and they go to Mexico, another tough place. The momentum would be firmly on the McLaren side. And obviously one DNF either side changes the whole complexion of it, but I think we'll leave here, and the friend of the pod, Chris Medlin, keeps saying this, doesn't he? He says we'll know when we leave Austin the state of the championship. And I think he's kind of right there. Like, we will kind of leave here, and if Max wins, you're like, okay, it's going to be very difficult for McLaren to do this. If Lando comes away with a win in the Grand Prix especially, but even if he beats Max in the sprint, takes a big chunk of points out of him, you look at that route to the championship for him, and it would suggest that McLaren's car has stayed ahead of Red Bull's crucially as well. That's a huge game changer. So we'll see. But yeah, I mean, again, perfect backdrop for that, because this is a place as well. I remember Lewis and Max having a great fight here in 2021 during their fight. I could see Max and Lando just disappearing off into the distance, having a nice fight again. And
the fantastic thing about F1 at the moment is you've got 4 different teams that can win. You know, you've got Red Bull and McLaren going for this title, both in constructors and in drivers. Then you've got Ferrari and Mercedes, and all 4 of those teams we're expecting to have upgrades up this race. Probably the last major upgrades we're going to see from those teams for the rest of the season, because already their focus is on next year. So, you know, this is the last chance really to add that performance. McLaren, we know, made a big step in Miami. They're pretty confident that they've got something not quite on that level, but something that's going to move them forward again. They haven't really upgraded the car much in between. It's been going so well. I think they've been a bit nervous to add stuff on it, you know, to play around with it too much. But there's jeopardy there, because as much as upgrades tell you in a wind tunnel they're going to do one thing, when you get out on a track like this with wind like we have around here, and all of a sudden it's about driver confidence going into high-speed corners, it's about whether the rear end sits nicely through a bumpy corner or starts jumping around. And if they come here and it's all a bit of a surprise and they have one practice session, remember sprint race this weekend, one practice session to get it right, and it's not right, then that could also pivot this whole season. You know, meanwhile, Red Bull, they've been struggling to add performance to that car since May, really, this year. They've got an upgrade coming. If that all of a sudden unlocks, they get back to basically the driver comfort again, that driver confidence with the car through high-speed corners again. If that comes back, you can guarantee Max Verstappen's going to make the most of it, and probably, given the 52-point advantage he has right now, go and take the title.
Nate, how do you see what Laz just said about how this actual weekend lays out with one practice session, the sprint race, and all these upgrades? Like, could this be a complete wild card though? Like, what do you think we'll have any sense of what we're going to see in the Grand Prix from what we see the sprint race? Will we really get it?
I think so. The weird thing with the sprint race is sometimes it has the opposite effect in terms of the drama. You kind of get a sense of, okay, well, we kind of know where people are going to qualify now. We've kind of seen the pace of the race. But Laurence is right. Like, that one practice session and all those upgrades means I think there's going to be a lot of teams working a lot of things out. And we now have championship fight mindset. I agree with Laurence about McLaren now. It's one thing chasing from a long distance. Suddenly now McLaren are in the lead there. Yeah. And suddenly your mindset shifts completely when you're in the lead. Suddenly the risks you took 6 months ago become, let's not do that maybe. Let's hold back. Let's not overplay our hand. So I think that's going to be big. And does Lando start thinking, I've got to go for it at turn 1 in these moments? Does he hold back and say, I've got the car? We've seen that. It was Zandvoort, wasn't it, where he lost the lead early on, came back to Max. Does that patience stay? Lando's obviously had a bit of an up and down year in that regard. So I think it's a bit of a wild card. I'd struggle to bet against McLaren just because of what we've seen over the past kind of few months. But this is a kind of circuit where anything can happen. And Mercedes last year here were mega as well. Obviously, Lewis lost the podium after the race. But yeah, I think they could be the wild card element.
You mentioned bet, so my ears perked up. Just so you know, Lando is the favorite. He's even money to win this race. Max is second at plus 450, so 4.5 times your money. At this point in May, guys, you mentioned that's when McLaren came back on the map. We were talking about this off air. McLaren was plus 10,000. So if you bet a $1, you'd have won $1,000. So that's where you were at in May, and now you flip that to where they are the huge favorites, and now, massive underdogs are Red Bull. There's 6 races, 8 weeks essentially to go. How, if at all, does the congestion of where things are, we're going right to Mexico after this, then Brazil, how does that potentially affect the race here?
Yeah, it's that momentum that can build or just disappear straight away. And we're talking about Lando Norris here, and he's had some brilliant performances this year, but this is the first time he's found himself in a title fight, and it's almost like he's entered a title fight by the back door as well. He's just all of a sudden found himself with a car that's capable of doing it. Red Bull have imploded in a way that no one imagined they would do. And so it's going to be so interesting to see what Lando's got there, whether he's got that title-winning mentality, because he's going to need it. And remember, he's up against Max Verstappen, who's just won the last 3 of them, so knows how it's done. But it was similar when we had Max v Lewis in 2021. One of the reasons that was such an exciting and interesting battle was because you had Lewis Hamilton, who had won 7 of them, and Max going for his first, and 2 drivers who were very evenly matched, both racing really hard. And that will be interesting as well. If they get on track together, side by side, into turn 1 here or turn 12 down the bottom, who's going to give way? Who's going to back out? Because I'm getting the impression with Lando, after what happened in Austria and a few of the little kind of tete-a-tetes they've had during the year, that he's not backing down anymore, and he can see this as an opportunity. And let's not forget, these opportunities don't always come around. McLaren, we didn't expect them to be in this position. They'll likely be competitive again next year, but then we have the rule reset in 2026. No guarantees beyond that. And also for next year, I bet Lando's looking across the garage at Oscar Piastri and thinking, this kid's looking properly quick now. Maybe this is my big opportunity to stamp my authority on the team, win the title. All of that going through his head, and he's got to turn that into performance. He's got to understand, all those little details of setup and, corner entry and braking point, all those things that he has to do every weekend anyway. But all of a sudden with that extra pressure, and it's going to be fascinating to see how he reacts. And I don't know. I honestly don't know. A lot of people have talked him down, so I don't want to do that. But I don't know how he's going to react. And just seeing that play out over such a quick succession of races, like you said. We're going to be in Brazil in no time, and that's 3 of these 6 races gone. Half the races disappeared, even more than half the points, because that's 2 sprint races in that 3. Only 1 left in Qatar after that. It's going to be fascinating.
I think Laurence has hit the nail on the head there, because again, we keep comparing to Max and Lewis, but it feels like an apt comparison because it was so recent, and the last time we had that fight, we know in those in situations, Max isn't a guy who yields. So Lando does have to 100% commit to these moves. That was Austria all over. Max was like, hey, if you want to pass me, you can get by. When Lewis and Max started colliding in 21, the same thing happened. Lewis was like, okay, I'm not going to yield, and they started colliding. That raised the pressure up, and then you saw both guys starting to kind of get under each other's skin a little bit. I think Lando, that's going to be key at some point in this season. It might be here, it might be Mexico, it might be any of the races. Surely they're going to have a moment where the two of them are wheel to wheel on track. Lando is the guy who has to get in front of Max. Max knows that, and I think that the way we know Max races, right on that line, means it's going to have to be something pretty special for Lando to put it off. So I think that element as well will be in the back of his head, surely, with Austria. He might have even watched like a montage of 21 and be like, damn difficult
let's go.
To get past, damn difficult to get past Max Verstappen. So that is a really key factor here as well, to consider.
I mean, as a biased American, I want people in our country to watch this race and have these two be at the peak of their game. And Austria, I think if that's something like that turns out here, just to see them going head to head and understand that, maybe not with the wreck and the outcome, but like just understanding of like what this thing can look like at the highest level with everything to play for, I think that goes a long way. One question I asked you though, because you mentioned Piastri, and he's been excellent, obviously won a couple races back. That's what gives them the constructors lead right now, because he's been so solid. Checo's been up and down to say the least. So I'll start with you, Nate. How does the other teammate potentially affect the championship for the drivers here?
It's a great question. We've dealt with this McLaren team orders issue for a little while, haven't we? This whole papaya rules thing, which still makes me cringe just to say. But
despite the color of your hat. But go
ahead.
Yeah.
But then this is not a statement about McLaren either. But I think it's a really good point, because I think Red Bull have got to the stage where they know Perez really isn't going to be a factor. It's very unlikely he was. And again, sorry to bring 21 up, but that's when he won that Mexican Minister of Defense nickname, because there was a few races where he held Lewis up at key moments, and Red Bull really credits him for doing that. He's not been anywhere close to doing that. McLaren seem to have, it goes back to that championship mindset we were talking about. They seem to struggle to get their heads around what do we have to do with team orders. Obviously what they should be doing is saying to Piastri, you've got to help Lando. I think that is now the agreement, but it's taken a bit of time to get there. I think that's actually a really big thing for Lando, the fact that Piastri should be up there all the time. He can hold Max back, he can give Lando positions. I actually think that is a massive, massive thing, not just in the constructors, but in the drivers as well, because it's effectively 2v1 at most of these races, and that's going to hurt Max more than it's going to hurt Lando.
Agree?
Yeah, Perez is the weird one, isn't it? Because, I mean, Piastri's doing what a teammate should do, and McLaren have made clear now that if it does come down to it, they are going to favour Norris. They're not going to be pulling Piastri out of very good positions to try and just get on the points for Norris. But if it comes down to 2 of them, then we're going to favour Piastri. But Perez, it's been just such a strange year. I mean, we know he's struggled at Red Bull, and we know when the car is particularly difficult to drive, he struggles that bit more than Max. He's like the early warning sign, like the canary in the coal mine when Perez starts struggling. This year especially.
He's been kind of vindicated a bit in that.
I mean, they got to Monza, and all of a sudden, the downforce came off the car because you have to run it very low drag there because of the high speed straights. And all of a sudden, Max was struggling with all the same problems that Perez had, and Perez kind of turned around to the engineering team and said, "Told you guys, it wasn't just me." And he appreciates that Max is operating on that slightly higher level, can drive around some of these things. But the issue's there. But then we had that glimmer of hope from Perez in Azerbaijan, a circuit which he's always actually been very good at. And it looked so good, and of course it ended in that collision on the penultimate lap. But there's something in there, and this is what's frustrating Red Bull so much, something in there where potentially he's good enough and potentially he can have a big impact on this championship, and yet when it matters, it just seems like he can't quite pull it together.
But what an opportunity for Perez though. Like, there is hero status waiting for him at Red Bull if he can out of nowhere suddenly just be like, hold Lando up for a race or whatever it is. Yeah. So it is in there, I agree. And we saw glimpses of it in 21, 22 a little bit. And I think that it'd be a great way for Perez to mark what's been a really difficult season if he could do that.
Well, it's not just hero status, it's his future as well.
Yeah.
Because, we can talk about Liam Lawson in a bit, but Perez's position at the middle of this year was not strong whatsoever. And Daniel Ricciardo, who we just bid farewell to, it wasn't beyond the realms of possibility that he would make the step up to Red Bull. So I think Perez is really fighting for his future. And of course, where do we go next? I mean, there's a big Mexican following here. Yeah. There has been ever since 2012. We first came here, I remember there was always a huge Mexican fan base here to watch Checo. And then we go to Mexico City in a week's time. Well, I don't, but Nate does.
Yeah.
And I'll be at home in Connecticut.
And imagine if he can get the job done there somehow, or
imagine
if has a bag when he wins.
Imagine if he's ahead of Max. I mean, it's very unlikely to think, but that's where that becomes interesting.
Yeah.
Red Bull's suddenly we need this guy to get this win for him, but also you can't make that. How do you make that call? So lots of permutations there, that Red Bull will be having, sleepless nights.
That's a problem they would love to have, though.
They would love to be asking that question next week. Yeah.
We've focused really on McLaren and Red Bull here. There are 8 other teams on the grid, 2 of which you already mentioned, though, Laurence, Ferrari and Mercedes. And Mercedes in tracks like this, and this track, they've had success before. So how will they factor? Do you think that they're able to kind of infringe what we're talking about here?
Yeah, James Allison is their technical director, and he was talking about how big their upgrade is for this race, and how it's going to be a significant one. Again, they've made some big steps through this season, like serious steps. If you look at where they started and where they've got to. So I think they absolutely could factor here. And also when you've got Lewis Hamilton in the car, this circuit, we know, I think he's won 5 times here. So that can make the difference. And George Russell's no slouch either. And then Ferrari, I think from what Fred Vasseur, the team principal, was saying in Singapore, not quite so big an upgrade, but also the last one that they have this year. And they've felt for a long time now that the car's almost there, and it's just solving some of these issues with bouncing in high-speed corners. Got plenty of those around here for them to test out the upgrade and see whether it solves that. So this is a big one for them, just to also set that platform for next year. That's what those 2 teams are looking at doing. They want to win races, of course, but the most important thing is that they kind of get an understanding of all the issues they have right now, so they can bake in solutions into next year's car. And if that results in victories, if it results in taking points from Norris or Verstappen along the way, brilliant. But that's the main objective for those guys.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, Ferrari does it just tantalizingly close for them all the time, and it's weird. I mean, it's just the Ferrari way. You get a win in Monaco, and then a bit of a lull, and everyone's doom and gloom again. Wins in Monza, and everyone's like, oh my God, it's great. Then a bit of a lull again. And I think that what Fred's very good at doing is keeping people on the even keel. That's something Ferrari's always struggled with. So I'm quietly quite confident about where they're headed. Championships still seem a little far away. I mean, Lewis Hamilton must be relishing driving a bouncing car again next year. If that problem does come around again, it's slightly different to that. But obviously lots of things in the pipeline there. But yeah, I think honestly, all 4 teams are coming here feeling good. I think which is, to Laurence's point earlier, so rare to have that in Formula One. So we're in a really, really lucky position.
Well, it's rare to have this 4-week autumn break where everybody's doing upgrades and everybody's coming in with us it's almost like spring, like hope springs eternal here as we go into the last 6 races. Big storyline in this break. You mentioned it. Daniel Ricciardo no longer part of VCARB. You've got Liam Lawson taking that seat. He showed really well last year. He's going to start at the back of the grid because of power unit change out here. Nate, what are your expectations? Let's just start big picture. Not even expectations for him. The young man hasn't raced consistently all year. How challenging is that for him just to step in a sprint race and a race with not a lot of practice sessions here, as we've already mentioned, in a weekend like this?
It is a big challenge, but I think what we're seeing more and more now, you look at Oliver Behrman, you look at Antonelli, you look at Colapinto even in the Williams. These young guys now are coming in and they're just so well prepared. They're so ready to race in Formula One. And Lawson is here, not just because Daniel Ricciardo didn't perform at the level they wanted, but he impressed so much last year in those 5 races. I think what he showed last year, the thing that impressed Red Bull so much was didn't make a lot of mistakes. Was just solid, fast, at every point they needed him to be, and that's really what he needs to do. It's just keep his nose clean. I don't think he needs to come here and have incredible results. It's literally just be consistent, beat Yuki Tsunoda every so often. That's something that Daniel struggled with at points in the year. But I think that the good thing and the bad thing for him is everyone, at the moment he steps in the car, are going to be talking about Perez the next season. That is underpinning everything he does this year. But Liam Lawson, you talk to him, I mean, he's a Kiwi, he's from New Zealand, he's as cool as they come. Yeah. So I don't know how much that's going to affect him. I think he's like, sometimes those guys are so laid back, you're like, how on earth is he a Formula One driver? Visor goes down, he just turns into a competitive animal. But I think he'll be all right. And I'm actually really excited. I know it's a shame that Ricciardo's not here, but it's great when we see new faces come in, and I think Lawson's, especially if he can kind of nail the next few races, I think he's got a good future kind of ahead of him in the next couple of years.
Is that future going to be with this team or Red Bull? Because that's one thing. It's always about who's going to be Red Bull Racing, who's going to be with Max. Is Checo in jeopardy? If you're Yuki Tsunoda, you've got to hate that because he's just always just buzzed right by. Like Ricciardo, maybe he could get back there. Like, what is the path for Liam right now? Is it just to get a seat next year, or is he already the conversation already about is he going to be able to pair with Max?
So yeah, I mean, it's not been confirmed, but I think unless he really messes up or really, it wouldn't even be messing up. It would be struggle, like real deep struggle of just not being able to get the car in the right place and perform. Then perhaps Red Bull would look for somebody else at RB. Otherwise, that RB seat, as far as I'm aware, is his. I mean, and I don't think Lawson will, because also we talk about there's pressure and stuff. He's been waiting 3 years for this opportunity. He's been desperate to get in that car and show what he can do. And then he's a little bit, I think Red Bull, perfect world for Red Bull. Checo starts performing the final 6 races, and then they go into next year with Max and Checo in the Red Bull team, and then Liam's there as a backup if they need it. Yuki Tsunoda, I wish they would promote him. I think he's the obvious choice, but for whatever reason, Red Bull kind of often talk about his mentality behind the wheel and stuff like that. I disagree, and I think he's also worked on that really well and really hard and kind of made a difference, and I think he's turned into a really rounded driver, but from what we've seen and what we've heard, we can kind of assume that Tsunoda's not in that picture.
So his bet is made. Do you think he feels that way too? Does he feel like this is my limit at this team?
Yeah, I think it's very frustrating for him.
I'm sure.
And earlier this year, and for the first time really since he came into F1, he was talking to other teams, and other teams were showing interest. But Red Bull had this ability to extend his contract an extra year, as long as they signed it by the date which was pre-Canadian Grand Prix. I think that's when we found out. And so he's kind of stuck there. And we've seen Red Bull do this with drivers before. Yeah. I mean, Pierre Gasly was in a position where he was slightly handcuffed to the junior Red Bull team. Carlos Sainz eventually worked his way out of it via Renault, and of course ended up at Ferrari. We know he's now leaving, but so there are ways out. But it all depends on those contracts and whether Red Bull want to take up options. But because Red Bull are in this slightly weird position, despite having probably one of the most established junior driver programs and certainly throw a lot of money at that junior driver program, they've ended up in a situation where they've got one absolutely incredible driver, Max Verstappen, and then other ones they're not sure about, or potentially they're not given the opportunities they should be to them. Meanwhile, because of the cutthroat nature of it all, and Daniel Ricciardo could tell you all about that, they're constantly under pressure in a way that I don't think drivers at other teams are. I mean, Logan Sargent, of course, got the boot halfway through this season from Williams, but it was coming, It's like, and he got given lots of opportunities. With Red Bull, it sometimes feels like within the space of 2 weekends, everyone's perception within that team of a driver can just swing around 180 degrees, and and you're all of a sudden you've gone from being the guy who's going to replace Checo or going to be Max Verstappen's teammate to the guy who's out the door, and it's just crazy how quick that happens in that team.
Well, Ricciardo was a great example of that. There were weeks before the summer break where we were like, he's in line to replace Perez. I think we all left the last race before the summer break thinking, well, Perez could get replaced. First day of the break, we hear news, no, he's staying. And it was like, okay, well, it's so different. So it's such a bizarre situation. On the Yuki point as well, the frustrating thing with that is they always talk about his temperament. Great teams can manage drivers that they think have, you work with the driver, you say that's how the driver is, we know he can perform, how do we get the best out of him? Despite that, Max isn't the easiest driver to work with. They work with him, but like they work with him. They're like, okay, they're all a certain way. You work with them, you work out the best way to get the thing out of them. So yeah, that is really frustrating for Yuki, and I think he's just at a point now where it's like we saw Gasly in that position, like Laurence mentioned, and he was until Alpine signed him, he was like, don't know really what to do. So weird.
So what do you expect from Liam, though? Because does it take a little pressure off to start at the back of the grid? Like he's still going to be qualifying as fast as he can, but it doesn't matter. He is where he is. Does that kind of help him, Laz, to feel like eased in, if you will? Yeah,
and he's also got the sprint race as well.
Of course,
true. That's hard in itself because he's going to have one practice session, then straight into sprint qualifying, and then to sprint race. But I think also it's a similar situation to what we had with Ollie Behrman in Saudi Arabia, and what we've had with Franco Colapinto since he replaced Logan Sargent at Williams, and that's the expectations are kind of like set relatively low because everyone knows how tough it is to come in mid-season. I remember a few years ago we used to talk about how teams should never do it because it's just asking so much of a driver to go straight into a car without the benefit of winter testing, which I'd usually have ahead of the first race, and just perform. So there'll be an expectation that he's not going to be quite 100% on it to start with. But then the race from the back of the grid, I don't think that's such a bad thing, actually. I think that's actually quite good, because it will just give him, all of the how many laps it is here to just get his head around that car, learn about that car, and then take those lessons and try and transfer that to Mexico and Brazil.
Yeah. So quick one on that. We mentioned it before we started recording. COTA are hoping Danny Rick turns up. I don't think he is going to.
That was my next question.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
But
I think that the spectre of Ricciardo is just going to hang over Lawson for at least this weekend. Every question I said about Perez earlier, but that's how his appearance this weekend is being framed. A lot of people are like, that should be Ricciardo in that seat. I don't think it'll affect him that much. I think what hurts him more than anything else is the suggestion that somehow he got Daniel out of that seat, which isn't true. He was just there waiting in the wings, and I think that once he's ridden out of that, I think he'll be fine.
I didn't mean to cut off your question. You can throw it back to us. You answered the question. Yeah. I feel bad for Danny Rick. I think most people do. If he doesn't get hurt, was it Zandvoort last year where he broke his wrist?
Yep.
Then maybe he finds his confidence and he's still in the seat. Maybe he does, because it seemed like Horner wanted him to return. And Horner was given that interview. You kind of wanted him to make the full 100%. Circle and come back and be with Max, and it just wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, Horner wanted that, and Helmut Marko didn't want it.
Did not want
ultimately became. And the issue was for Horner, and you're exactly right. That I think was the moment we'll look back on, and that's the moment that the Ricciardo comeback just faltered, because not only did it put him out when he had a bit of momentum, I think he'd had 2 races, it gave Lawson that platform, and Lawson, to his credit, came in, did exactly what he had to do, and it just changed the whole dynamic there. Ricciardo suddenly came back. He had a good result in Mexico last year. I think he was 6th, but he just wasn't able to kick on and find regular form. Started this year poorly, and as soon as that happened, I mean, we were talking. I remember in Japan, people were saying, "Is he even going to see out? Is he even going to get to Miami?" That was the narrative. It was just it was up and down, up and down.
Well, that was the case. I mean, Christian recently said that Helmut Marko wanted him out in Spain, I think it was. And
that pressure. That's a long time
I think this was a little bit Christian kind of trying to appease the fans to some extent. Say, look, I tried to give him the opportunity, but it's been that pressure the whole time. But that's the toughest thing, I think, as a Formula One driver, when you're struggling with this incredibly technical sport, and yet it's that pressure and that knowledge that, say, someone like Helmut Marko doesn't want you in the seat.
Yeah.
That's hard to deal with, and so I think Daniel ultimately, it wasn't to be.
All right, we'll see if he rides up on a horse, maybe a bull. I don't know. Bevo, the Longhorn might show up. Just a couple of things I want to touch on, just big pictures. We're coming back into the races and looking forward a little bit to next year. We talked about the V-Carb seat, obviously. What about Sauber? Where are they in terms of their 2026? Like, who would you put as the pole position to get that seat?
For 25, because the only remaining seat, assuming that Lawson is RB. I think Bottas is the very easy option for them. But the thing is, they're in absolutely no rush. Remember, this is also the Audi project going forward. So, next year they'll still be called Sauber. From 2026, they'll have an Audi engine, they'll be Audi. So they're trying to, basically lay the framework that they need to build upon. And in many ways, Valtteri Bottas is, a very safe pair of hands. They've got Nico Hülkenberg there already. So it'll be super experienced couple of drivers just to, kind of get through that season, get the points when they come up. But if they can get their hands on someone like Gabriel Bortoleto, new young Brazilian driver in F2, currently associated with McLaren, and I think that's part of the issue, is that, I'm not entirely sure on the contract situation there, but why would McLaren let him go to Audi? And if they did, they'd want him on a long piece of string so they could pull him back if they need to, because, Norris and Piastri, 2 amazing drivers, but what if those 2 fall out, or there's a situation where one of those drivers leaves if the car isn't quite where it should be in 26, so Bortoleto's emerged in this F2 season as a really great talent, and so I think Audi are very closely assessing him, and also Théo Pourchaire, who they've had in their junior driver lineup for a long time, and whether they just give him the opportunity and just take a chance on youth, because as much as I said a safe pair of hands is a great thing, and all the feedback and everything's a great thing, the car in 2025 will go in the bin at the end of the year, because it doesn't really contribute to 2026. So if you can give a driver who's got a lot of potential the opportunity to get in one of those cars, but right now I think they're looking at their options. They'll be obviously making sure if they can get hold of Bortoleto that it's in a situation that's favourable to them, because they don't want to basically be training up McLaren's next driver, and then meanwhile they've got Hülkenberg and basically any driver who's on the periphery of Formula One in any way right now. Their only option is to try and get that Sauber driver if they want to be in the sport next year. And of course, Colapinto is the other guy. But Colapinto, of course, similar situation with Williams. I think what Williams have seen, they don't want him to go. So again, depends what's in his contract. Again, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know what you've heard, but if Audi, if they want someone, they'll want them long term, and they want somebody they can push forward into 2026. I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. It does sound tricky for Colapinto, but it's a great story for Audi to tell, isn't it? If they come into the sport with a young driver who's competitive, as good as Bottas is, I think people still see Bottas as a guy who's been around for a long time. If you're Audi, one of the young guys coming in, look at Piastri coming in, that's a McLaren story. I know he started with Alpine, but McLaren gave him that chance. So I think there is a nice story to be told there, but I get the feeling Bottas will be the safe short-term option, and then we'll see beyond that. But it's a great seat to be in if you look at, the investments coming. I don't think they're going to be that competitive straight out of the gate, but if you're a younger driver, that's actually a really good place to land, I think, because the pressure is kind of off for a while, even when they become Audi. So we'll see how that plays out.
Another kind of just random question as we look toward the end of the season, the last 6 races. It does end Lewis Hamilton's tenure reign at Mercedes. So how, if at all, could that impact the next 6 races? Could it impact it here? Like just the relationship with him, the team? When you're watching races for me from across the pond and listening, reading what you guys are writing, sometimes there's some friction there, it seems. Like, how can this play a factor either today or the next races as we go forward with him and George and the team?
Yeah, I think ideal world, Lewis and Toto and Mercedes want to finish on a high, and everyone knows what the situation is, and they have done since the start of the year. So it's, it is what it is now, and they've got to get through it. But Lewis will be looking to, obviously, Lewis Hamilton wants to win a race no matter what car he's in, but he'll be looking to end it on a high. And it feels like, if this upgrade works, then potentially he can be there. But yeah, I think with Lewis, there'll be a part of his mind which is already looking to Ferrari and trying to figure out what he can do and how he can prepare himself best for that next chapter in his career. But I don't know. I feel like we've spoken so much about Lewis over this year, and we've known about it for so long that it's not, these 6 races, I don't think it's that much of a surprise to anyone. It's not. I don't think it's actually going to change things that much. No,
and his motivation didn't. One of the easy questions for him at the start of the year was, are you going to be motivated for a full season knowing you're leaving? Obviously he's won 2 races. He's had maybe some struggles at different points, but it hasn't felt like we've had a different Lewis at any point this year. It feels like the same guy. So I don't know, really. It's fascinating in Formula 1. There's so few sports where you do a whole season sometimes, or half a season, and you're like, well, I'm driving for them next year. Maybe have a little peek around the back. Maybe in football you have an idea that maybe you're going to go to a team, but still, until it's done, you don't know. And by then it's usually the end of the season. Maybe getting traded mid-season is a comparison, but even then you don't know that's coming. So it is fascinating. And I think that storyline will ramp up as we get closer, because whatever happens, incredible partnership, and I hope, for the sake of the legacy of that team, I hope it ends on a good high.
Well, the one thing that is interesting is that I think Lewis it's surprised him how emotional he's been about it. So when we left the Italian Grand Prix, right now that's in, with the length of the calendar we have now, it's pretty much middle of the season, but it was the last time he was going to be in the Mercedes engineering office that is in the truck and goes around Europe, and the last time he was going to be in his driver room in the Mercedes hospitality unit. And that hit him. It also happened to be the weekend that the Mercedes announced Kimi Antonelli as his replacement. Now, he knew that was coming. Like, Mercedes knew that was coming from a long way off. But because it was out there officially, he said he woke up that morning and it did feel strange to him that there's going to be a different driver in what really is, it is his car. Like, all of that success that Mercedes has had comes through Lewis's work. So he was such a big part of it. He wasn't there in 2010 when they first came back, Mercedes, but they weren't winning titles then. As soon as he got there, 2013, and then into 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, they were winning titles, and he was a huge part of that. And also that, that engineering team. I've been lucky enough to spend some time with some of those guys over the years, and they're just such a lovely group of people. Like, they're really, really nice, and they have a bond that goes back even further to the old Honda days, and the BAR days when that team was first set up. And so I think he won't find a team like that at Ferrari. It will be different. There'll be bits of it which I'm sure are better, but he won't ever have that again. And I think that is really starting to hit home with him a bit. So I think we will see a very emotional Lewis over these last 6 races, but I think if he gets the opportunity, he'll still get the job done on track.
Gotcha. All right, we're going to get back to this race. I'll get your predictions in a second here. If you are watching on YouTube and listening, of course, we will be live an hour before the race on Sunday, the Grand Prix, but we have the Saturday of the sprint race. We've got 34 points up to grabs. We will get to that in a second. We did say it's the epicenter of sport here. We've got the college football game, college game day. We got the concerts somewhere in the middle of this melee over here. Are you guys going to participate in other stuff here? What are we mixing in? Other than your golf game yesterday, I didn't ask how you played, but other than that.
Well, for me, not too bad. I hit 94, which the way I play, that's actually not too bad.
Beautiful.
But unfortunately, and every year we come here,
we don't.
We're flat out. Like, it's really hard. But Nate, we're going to try and get you across to
We'll try and get out of the game after qualifying, so see what that's like. Try and compare the two, see. Because I mean,
have you been to a college football game before?
I went to the SEC Championship game, just a little, cashally went there last year.
Well,
that's for my first game. What?
Well, I would say this: the difference is that is a neutral venue.
Yeah, exactly.
So like when you are on site, this is a campus venue in Texas.
That's what everyone says. I thought for a second I was worried you were going to ask for our predictions for the game. I was like, I've really got no idea what.
Why not fire off? I think it's
5-point 27-20 to Longhorns. That's
a good guess.
Pretty good. Pretty good guess.
1911.
Maybe a scorigami there. I don't know if that's the thing. But the great thing with this place though is we're actually going to be playing some mini golf in a second with the boss of the circuit. We've got like a little media event. But what's great about this circuit, and I think that they've really like raised the level a little bit, is they try and put new stuff on here for fans every year. Like you come in, they're building. We just noticed when we came in, they're building like a roller coaster.
It's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Anybody want that back?
Which
that
I hadn't heard anything about. And there's
coaster.
like half a roller coaster here, which is kind of crazy. And that we're seeing that with every race now. Like every race is trying to like up the ante, and then they see other races do more, and they're like, well, we gotta build it. So it's cool coming back every year and seeing those things.
Well, here, bear in mind, guys, there'll be a mall here, but in like 2 years,
Yeah.
this is America. There'll be hotels out here. All that'll happen in the next 3 or 4 years, I'm sure.
I'm surprised it hasn't yet. I'm surprised
it's coming. Don't worry, it's coming.
Is this where we are?
Are
Predictions?
you
Or we?
doing anything
No, I think I'm kind of working pretty flat out through it.
Yeah.
I'd love to try and make the game. I might be able to make like the very last.
You can get the second half.
Listeners of our show will be able to watch Laurence on GMA on Sunday.
Oh, there we go.
True.
So
Yeah,
Good
that's
Morning
exciting.
America is
Yeah.
here.
So
Check
that's
out
good.
Laurence on Sunday morning around 5 a.m. Eastern time.
Very early wake up call. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome. But that's what's cool about this race for us, is that there's just such a presence of TV media here. You really feel the buzz about it. So that's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, the ESPN tent is right behind her, so that's set. You have Sports Center's here, the 2 o'clock, the 6 o'clock. So there's a big ESPN presence, huge media presence overall.
I don't know if you've been up there yet. Last year we went up to the big tower, and that's kind of partly terrifying. Partly,
what is that?
You can just watch it. It's a great viewing platform up there.
It is one of the best. I mean, we talked about this being one of the best.
Yeah.
Well, with the right pass, you can get up there during the race. But
you've got the right pass. You've got the right pass.
I want to do it all.
Yeah. If it says ESPN on it, I think you're okay. You can get up there.
Let's go. All right.
But that is a really special place to watch.
I'm pumped.
Don't stand too near the edge because you feel like you're going to fall off. But that's just me.
I'm petrified of heights.
Yeah, same.
That'll go real
well.
well.
I was like peeking over.
There's glass.
Oh, really?
There is.
Yeah. Not the whole way across, but yeah.
All right. Time for predictions. Nate, we'll start with you. What do we got here? 34-point. I want the sprint race, though, too. Sprint race.
Oh, okay. Nice.
And the Grand Prix, because every point matters right now.
Yeah. That's right. So that's a really, it's hard to work that out. I think Lando's gonna get a win on one of the races. I'm trying to work out which is more likely. I reckon sprint race, you have Lando, Piastri, Max, 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
But I really feel, I've just got a feeling that Red Bull are going to come back this weekend. So it used to be easy to predict Max to win.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to say Max wins, Lando second, Lewis third. I just think we've got 4 teams coming here, all in with a shout. Red Bull, they've been on the back foot for so long. If they get if the things they're bringing this weekend get that car back into place, I think Max is just so good at turning up at races like this, bit between his teeth, and just driving the wheels off the car. So yeah, those would be my predictions. But I mean, brave at the moment to not say Lando and McLaren winning both races. But yeah, I hope that's not the case either, because obviously it'd be good for Lando to win. But I've just got a feeling Red Bull this weekend.
Right, I'm going to go for the Grand Prix first, because I already had that in my mind. Lando Norris.
Sorry for the curveball.
Yeah, no.
I liked it. It kept me on my feet. I had to kind of make it up as I went, basically.
Lando Norris to win. Max Verstappen second. Hopefully that brilliant battle we talked about, touching wheels into turn 1 and all the rest of it. And then Lewis Hamilton, that guy that we were just saying, and Mercedes upgrade in third place, because he's always quick round here. In the sprint, I'm going to say Max Verstappen wins it. Maybe Oscar Piastri second, because he's going to be quick around here, and then I think maybe something happens to Lando, so I'll stick Lewis again in third for the sprint. And yourself, come on.
The sprint one surprised me too, because I just
I
didn't know I had that in my head either.
I feel like you have to come up with something different.
Also, you're doing predictions on behalf of Katie's box score this week.
Right, yeah.
I didn't know
that.
In that regard, Colapinto won. Let's keep it going. No, I will start with the sprint race then. I do think somebody said Lando's going to get a win, so I think Lando wins the sprint race. I think Lewis comes in second, and we'll go with Max in third. I think Max has a comeback. I'm a Red Bull guy, like Max since starting with the Netflix days, before he won his first thing, and so I'm going to go Max to win it, Lando second, and because we've all said Lewis was my initial take, but we're gonna turn it off, turn it a little different. We'll go Charles. We'll go Charles in third.
Yeah, he's
in the mix. Maybe we left Ferrari out of the mix here, and I feel like every time I underestimate him, particularly my bets, he hoses me. So here we go. So there we go.
That's Ferrari fandom for you right there. When you think they're going to win, they don't. When you don't think it, they pop out and do something. So
that's why I stopped betting them about 3 races ago. I was like, I'm done with you guys. I can't do it. I'm done. I'm out. All right, we're not out though. Sunday, hour before the race, right here on YouTube. And listen to the podcast, obviously, after the fact. Join the coverage on ESPN. For Nate, Laz, I'm Dalen. We'll see you Sunday, an hour before the race.